We are in for an absolute treat today. So, the year is 1927. It is Jose Raul Capablanca versus Alexander Alekhine, or Alekhine. I'm going to say Alekhine, but I think it's pronounced Alekhine. But regardless, game 34, first to six wins the match. Alexander Alekhine is up 5-3 right now. So if he wins this game, he is world champion. And that was crazy at the time because Capablanca is renowned or known to be the most natural chess genius the world has ever seen. Nobody thought Alexander stood a chance, but he did because he became world champion. His approach to this was to play in an interesting way, to throw Capablanca off because he wasn't going to beat him principled. He wasn't going to beat him in ways where he was playing normally. So I was interested in the fact that many of these games were major piece endgames. You don't see that a lot. And this is an absolute major piece endgame masterpiece from start to finish. But queens and rooks on the board with an extra pawn. This shows great conversion technique against another endgame genius. Alekhine had a tragic life. He became an alcoholic. He was known as the drunken world champion, I'm going to say. He came up with knight f6, pulled up to tournaments drunk, still beat players. He did have a tragic life, but this was not part of it. This was a world championship match where he won. So without further ado, we are going to get into it. Alekhine is white. We get a queen's gambit declined as we did in much of the match. Bishop g5, seen a bunch today. Pawn e3, and here pawn a3. Okay. So the reason he played pawn a3 is because, I forget the name of it. Names don't matter though. Ideas do. Is he didn't want to go into this knight f3, queen a5 business with the pin and possibly doubling up the pawns. So he went a3 and now queen a5 is not possible. Why? Well, if you go queen a5, b4, kicks out the queen. We are not scared of this because our a pawn is not actually pinned. Oh, by the way, I changed the board because the other board was a little goofy. Let me know if you like this board better or if it doesn't matter. Just trying out new things. You know how it is. Minor differences. Okay, bishop to e7, cutting the pin from the bishop on g5. Knight f3 developing and bishop d3. We see this all the time in present day chess. What does black do once the light squared bishop goes to d3? So you're taught once the bishop moves to take on c4 because then technically you gain a tempo because the bishop has to move twice. You don't want your pieces moving 2 times in a row. So black gets something out of that. Knight d5. Now he jumps into the center of the board, taking the spot of where the pawn was. That is a very good centralized knight. Of course, it's not taken. The bishop is taken, and now the queen takes. Knight to e4. I can speak. I hate when I stutter when I make videos. But not bishop takes because then a very pawn structure black would have. Knight to e4 is a good move. Either its idea is to route to d2, support this knight, or to go to g3, kind of like that Caro-Kann Tartakower structure. So we get that Caro-Kann structure, knight on g3, knight on f3. That's what it reminds me of. Check out the Caro-Kann video for that theory. Okay, pawn to c5. With these pawns on c6, e6, kind of like a Slav, semi-Slav idea, eventually in the middle game, black has to create space. He needs to fight back, strike in the center, either with c5 or e5. Capablanca chooses c5. Of course, you do not want to take because then black gets into the position. He gets the open d-file. He can route his bishop out. So do not take this pawn on c5. So we get castles, knight b6, targeting the bishop. You do not want him to take your bishop. So bishop to a2, saving it. I know in blitz games, this bishop on a2, kind of like the bishop on a7 in the Con Sicilian video, is forgotten about. And great attacks can arise. We got cd4. He does not opt to go into the isolated pawn position, so he takes with the knight. And yeah, Capablanca was a genius. g6. This looks anti-positional, but what do you think the idea is? If you think the idea is to go e5 and not allow the knights to dance to f5, you are also a genius. So he wants to play e5, open up the bishop, but he doesn't want a knight coming to f5. Understandable. So g6. Yes, it creates dark squared holes, but does white have a dark squared bishop? No. So he can't take advantage of the holes that are created. Rook c1, bishop d7, both developing. I cannot wait for this endgame. This endgame is an absolute masterpiece. Precision. Queen e2, though. It's a good middle game, too. Rook a c8. rooks staring at each other. Typically, whoever trades loses the trade, because if white trades, black guards the open file. Vice versa, if black trades, white gets the open file. Don't allow your opponent to get the open file. E4, gaining space in the center. E5, the plan has worked perfectly. These pawns blockade each other in the center of the board. I thought this was a D4, D5 opening. Now we have pawns on E4, E5. Chess is wild. Knight F3 and King G7. Point of King G7 is to clamp down on the dark squared holes. You're not really afraid of anything. Also, it gets out of the pin of the bishop. So if you ever want to move the F pawn, now you're free to do so. I guess it gives this rook some space if you ever want to attack on the king side. That is far-fetched, but so is chess. H3, H6. Yes, this weakens G6 a little bit, but these knights cannot come into the position, and if those knights do come into the position, bad things happen. By the way, do not move your bishop to C6 and go G5, because you will get forked. That's how we think, right? Queen D2, bishop E6, a queen shift, a bishop slide. We get a bishop trade, and now queen A5. Aiming at E5, aiming at A7. I think white is beginning to take over the position. Eval bar doesn't agree, but I mean, look at the board. I would rather be white than black. I don't know about you guys. Knight C4, queen takes A7, and white picks up a pawn. Temporarily, because black also picks up a pawn. Now we get the rook trade. So what was the idea behind the rook trade? Well, now white picks up queen takes B7, knight C4, aiming at the weak pawn on the A file, but we get a genius queen B4. Guarding the pawn and bringing the queen out of danger. Rook A8, continuing to build up on the pawn, and rook A1. Remember, rooks behind passed pawns, not from the side of passed pawns. It's way easier to guard them from behind. Every time you push it, you're going to gain space. We got queen C6. Now, this is a great defensive game by Capablanca as well, but good offense will beat good defense. So he is stopping the pawn from getting pushed. Always disallow your opponent's passed pawn from being pushed, because in the endgame, they are fast, they are strong. We get A4. Oh, by the way, I could not believe it. This is the winning match of the World Championship match, and I couldn't find it anywhere on YouTube. I must be mistaken. I didn't look that hard, but I don't want to make repeat videos. But no one seemed to do this. And also, thank you for commenting this. I have not looked at many old school Grandmaster games, and I think this is my new passion. I've thoroughly been enjoying doing this. I think it's going to improve my chess. I hope it improves yours as well. Fascinating. Such an eternal game. Knight takes E4. Did white just lose a pawn? No. I mean, yes, but no. See? Just wait. Knight takes E5. And the point is, if this knight takes, then you could take that knight. We get queen D6, offering up the queen trade. Everything is hanging. Some minor advantages will come depending on the way you trade. He trades in the best way. Queen takes C4, queen takes E5, and now rook to E1, pinning this pawn. You might say, hey, isn't that a free knight? No, don't hang your rook. But the knight is pinned, so black is under pressure. He goes knight D6, offering up a trade, and Alekhine declines the trade. Reason being is if we get rook takes queen, I believe this would fizzle out to a draw, right? The knight takes the queen, gains a tempo. How is this rook going to attack or guard that pawn, rather? It can't, because after rook takes, black would guard the knight. A completely symmetrical position. This would be a draw, no doubt. Obviously, white is applying pressure, so he leaves pieces on the board. Queen C1, guarding the rook that is now hitting the queen. We got queen F6, knight E4, trading pieces, and now we have our major piece endgame with a pawn on the A file. Granted, the rook is guarding it from the side. We would rather have it guarding it from behind. So let's see what Capablanca does. Okay, rook B8, allowing the rook to get behind the pawn. White has gained a little bit of an advantage, and rook A5. It's very hard to get a passed pawn through when it's solidified by black's pieces. So black is going to try to not allow it to get pushed. That is why he went rook to A5. Queen C7, trying to get the rook to move, applying some pressure on the 7th rank. The queen guards. Now he's double blockading the pawn. That pawn is going absolutely nowhere. But white's pieces are free to move. Queen C3, check. That would be a fork if the queen, I'm making up words now. If the queen was not guarding the rook, that would be a fork. King h7, rook d2. Okay, this move is genius. Why can the rook not take? Think about it. If the rook now takes the pawn, we would get rook to d8 and white has a winning advantage. Yes, rook a1 is a check, but that is just a check. There are no more checks. How are you going to stop this? I got news for you. You're not. So that is a crazy attack using the open lanes to black's king and rook d2. Okay, so queen b6. Capablanca was a stud. He's not going to allow the rook to go to d8 and rook to d7. Rooks on the 7th are good. That is a weak f7 pawn. We get queen b1 check, king h2, queen b8 check, but then just g3 and there are no more checks. Rook to f5, attacking our pawn, defending their own pawn. Looks pretty good, except white centralizes the queen. He's now protecting f2, protecting a4, threatening rook d1, rook d8, I know my notation, and then threatening checkmate. That is a lot of threats. Queen e8 stops all of them. But now we get rook d5, going for the rook trade. Because if rook takes rook, queen takes, we get queen takes the passed pawn, queen takes f7, and this would be a hopeless position for black to hold. There's going to be a bunch of checks. I mean, not really. Up 2 pawns in a queen endgame, perfect structure. The safer king is typically okay. So not only does white have the safer king, he has 2 extra pawns. That would be crushing. So Capablanca does not accept. He goes rook f3, but our f2 pawn is still being guarded. We get pawn to h4. Queen h8, threatening a queen trade. We do not want a queen trade. For example, if we get queen takes h8, king takes h8, we would protect the pawn and threaten the rook. But it's very hard. You can imagine a position where the pawn ends up on a7, the white's rook ends up on a8, and the black king is on f6. There's no discovered checks. There's no whatever that position is called to win the rook. You know what I'm talking about. You've studied your rook endgames, I hope. If not, I have an endgame video that explains all of that. So, queen a1 getting behind the passed pawn, king g2 threatening the rook. The rook gets to safety, and now queen d4. Going for the rook trade. What is the difference? Well, the difference is black's rook cannot get behind the passed pawn. It would have to stay in front of the pawn, and that is a whole different dynamic. Can't speak. White's king is closer. We will guard the pawn, get our rook behind it, and we will squeeze black's rook away, and he'll end up having to sack the rook. Computer doesn't even know. Can't see that far ahead. But that's typically how that works. King g7, a5. Push your passed pawns. Blockade the passed pawns if you're on the other end of it. And now guard your passed pawn. He guards it from the side, but not for so long. Rook back to f6. And then he goes rook a4. He has to figure out how to make progress. I don't know what their clock situation was. They did have clocks in 1927, believe it or not. They indeed did play with it. No increment, though. No digital. King f3, king e5, king e3. Look, this is such like a composition endgame. It's beautiful. h5, symmetrical pawn structure, but now white starts marching their king over to the queen side. Now, beautiful move. What do you do to put your position in Zooks 1? Or to put your opponent's position in Zooks 1, rather. You waste a move. Because you see, if this king moves, you get in. And if this king moves the other way, you also get in. That is opposition. So he goes over here, we get a check, we get a repeat, but then king d4. White is figuring out how to make progress, probably thinking on his opponent's time. He now infiltrates over on the king side. There's a little bit of a box, but he's getting through the holes, right? There are holes with this type of pawn structure, and he got in. White's rook is guarding absolutely everything. So what do? Well, f4, he chooses, because this rook is now getting squeezed in. It'll take time for this rook to wrap around and attack g3. It will take precisely 2 moves to attack it, and it takes 1 move to defend it. So white's position is just, he's making it as perfect as possible. And see, black does not have the same luxury, because white is still, or already attacking the pawn on g6. We get rook d7, sliding, seeing how white's going to break through, and he breaks through with f4. A good decision. Crumble the pawn structure. Engine doesn't know what's going on. A win's a win. This is a winning idea. See, up and down, doesn't know. G takes f5. Now equal material, but that is gross. That is not equal material. That each one of those is not a full pawn because the structure is damaged. So black goes f4, trying to split white's pawns. White accepts. And then he cannot take on h5, so he goes over to attack the f7 pawn. Now, it looks like black's creating some counterplay. He's attacking f4, he's defending f7, he's defending h5. White now defends f4. How is white gonna break through? Okay, rook e4. Look at this. The point is that if king takes h5, you have check. So it's equal material, but not really. This forces a rook trade. Black's king is in la-la land, so you take the pawn and you promote. Also, keep in mind, chess rules. En passant. It's good that rule exists, right? Okay, so we do not get that. Black is going to leave rooks on the board. White gives up his passed pawn. It was a decoy. Rook e5, right? We're going to win both these pawns and be up 2 pawns. We win 1 pawn. Rook g1, a good try, keeping the king on the h file. And now we get rook g5, threatening a rook trade. Our king is in the better spot. We have more pawns. Sounds like a 1 endgame. It is. Rook to h1, trying to tie down white's king. But we get rook f5. We pick up the pawn, cut off black's king. And now black resigns because it is hopeless. There are many ways to win this. If you're unclear as to how to win this endgame, I think the easiest way is to just end up giving up the h-pawn and promoting. So, yeah, Capablanca resigns, Grandmaster resigns. Let's delve into how to win this, in case any of you guys are wondering. People don't always show everything, and I think it's good to, because these guys are Grandmasters. What's obvious to them is not obvious to everybody. So I would start with rook to e2. Point is that you're still cutting off the king and you're creating distance. Distance helps. Rook to f1, aiming at the pawn, and now king to g5. You get rook to g1 check. I'd go king f6. They would come after the pawn, either one. Let's say they come after the h-pawn. I would throw in a check, because when the kings oppose each other, it's good to kick the king as far as possible. Now, f5, an easy way to win. Rook takes. Oh no, you lost the pawn. Does not matter. This king is out of it. It is only a matter of time. Go king e7. You can build a bridge. There's an endless amount of checks, except there's not, because the king is protected by the pawn. Black really doesn't have any moves. Whatever he does, many ways to win. I would just go, let's say, rook f2, right? Rook f2. Now, wherever they waste a move, you can come here, check, get in front of the pawn. You've built a bridge. That is just one example of winning. I hope you guys enjoyed that. I hope you guys enjoyed this game. Comment down below who you want to see next. I am pumped. This was a major piece masterclass by both sides, by defending, by attacking. Alekhine won. He is now world champion, the Drunken world champion. Alekhine, a great chess player. Capablanca, also a genius. Thank you for watching. Have a great day.